The decades from the 70s until the 90s saw science fiction solidify its place in mainstream media. The 80s saw mammoth franchises such as Star Wars and Star Trek. Since their rampant success, filmmakers have utilized better CGI technology in the new decade, with big names such as James Cameron working on Terminator sequels. The 90s also graced with sci-fi gems, ranging from Star Trek parodies to interstellar masterpieces, which awed audiences with their realism. In this marvelous video, let's count down the top 17 sci-fi movies of the 90s that deserve an honorable reboot. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Clean it up.
Event Horizon, 1997. The 1997 film, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, is the bizarre poster child of a sci-fi flick and supernatural horror. The story portrayed the crew of Lewis and Clark on their rescue mission as they responded to a distress signal emitted by Event Horizon, a ship that had been lost 7 years earlier. The film is set in the year 2047, and the finding of Event Horizon is a bloody one since evidence of a massacre on board was undeniable. The moment the crew of Lewis and Clark stepped on the derelict ship, they were assaulted by maddening hallucinations that forced them to face their darkest regrets. It was revealed that Event Horizon's gravity drive had opened up a portal to hell, which caused the ship to become sentient. The mind-warping movie starred familiar faces, like Sam Neill as Dr. William, Lawrence Fishburne as Captain Miller, and Jolie Richardson as Lieutenant Stark. The film was an addition to the in-your-face, gory genre of space horror. It's a journey through time and space as audiences watch the previous crew of Event Horizon dabble in the worst kinds of debauchery before brutally mutilating one another. Despite its initial reception, Event Horizon has gained a cult following and had enough of a cultural impact to inspire the Dead Space video game series.
Anybody got any change?
Galaxy Quest, 1999. Who would have guessed that a Star Trek spoof would earn a place besides The Godfather and a place in the sun as a near-perfect movie? The beauty of the 1999 movie is the fact that it doesn't take itself seriously, which adds to its ingenuity. The sci-fi comedy, directed by Dean Parisot, took audiences on a comedic wild ride through space and spoke on how diehard some fandoms can get for their franchises. Galaxy Quest stars majorly loved actors such as Sigourney Weaver, Alan Rickman, Tim Allen, Tony Shalhoub, and a few more. The story portrayed the cast of an 80s space thriller TV show being mistaken for actual galaxy warriors by an alien race known as the Thermians. The Thermians mistook their fictional show for a historical documentary and called upon their help to fight off a violent race of aliens who wished for genocide. Galaxy Quest has made a lasting legacy for itself, while also paying homage to the original Star Trek films. It's considered to be one of the best sci-fi satires, which was received well by Star Trek fans along with the OG Star Trek cast, giving it well-deserved acclaim. While there have been talks of a sequel, it seems strange to continue the story without its key actor, Alan Rickman. A reboot with a whole new cast might be a wiser choice. The Gerver, 1991. The 1991 tokusatsu superhero film starred one of the most prominent faces in science fiction media, Mark Hamill, directed by Screaming Mad George, aka Joji Tani. This film is based heavily on the manga series of the same name by Takeo Yoshiki, a former researcher for the Kronos Corporation. Dr. Tetsu Sagawa had run off with a Gerver unit but was killed by a bestialized soldier part of the Zoonoids. Sagawa's daughter and her boyfriend, Sean, followed CIA agent Max Reed to the crime scene. There, Sean stumbled upon the hidden Gerver unit just as the bioorganic suit of armor bonded with him. Sean transformed into the Gerver and gained the ability to confront the Zoonoids. We also get to see the true intentions of the Kronos Corporation, which were the bad guys all along. Given the fact that this film was based on a widely loved and esteemed manga, it had big shoes to fill. The widespread consensus turned to the fact that it fell flat at the time of its release, and in a rare case, the sequel performed better than the original movie. A reboot is only fair, given the fact that today's audiences live for nostalgia.
People just aren't ready for you.
Iron Giant, 1999. The 1999 sci-fi film animated by Warner Brothers. and directed by Brad Bird, is a criminally underrated masterpiece. The story portrayed the unlikely friendship between 9-year-old Hogarth Hughes and a 50-foot-tall iron giant who crash-landed on Earth. A sophisticated tale was spun, since the Iron Giant was docile in nature and curious about the human condition. Hogarth first took the giant in after he was hit by a train and fell into pieces. The two read comics in the boy's barn, as the giant worried that he was similar to Superman's villain, Otomo the Metal Menace. But Hogarth reassured the gentle giant that he was more like Superman. The film also explored the existential ideas of human birth and death. Amidst the communist scare in the US, the Iron Giant realized that he was initially made to be a mass weapon of war, as he was equipped with machinery far more advanced than Earth had ever seen. The Iron Giant's defense mechanisms were activated whenever Hogarth was threatened. The Iron Giant is considered to be an anti-war movie and was based on the idea, what if a gun had a soul and didn't want to be a gun? Though released 2 decades ago, the Iron Giant deserved even more acclaim than it got. A tastefully done live-action Iron Giant reboot could have the potential of being a cinematic masterpiece in today's age. Space Truckers, 1996. The sci-fi comedy directed by Stuart Gordon began its story on Triton, Neptune's largest moon. The CEO of a major corporation on Triton was fighting for his life and defending his facility from a galactic cyborg warrior. Meanwhile, a group of space truckers delivered a precious cargo of square pigs at a truck stop in space while his partner had to give a shipment of alleged blow-up dolls to Earth. The space truckers were captured by space pirates, whose captain turned out to be the disgraced former CEO of Triton's corporation. The supposed blow-up dolls were models of the identical evil cyborg that were going to be launched on Earth in an all-out invasion. The disgraced CEO ended up becoming Earth's president following its privatization and bribed the space truckers to remain quiet about the whole affair. The film's star-studded cast included Dennis Hopper, who was the lead space trucker, and Joe, along with Debbie Mazar and Charles Dance as the bitter pirate captain, Mabel. Space Truckers is considered to be a campy, over-the-top, low-budget comedy that fits right into the category of sci-fi B-movies of the 90s. Its saving grace was the talented cast it presented. One would think they've seen everything until they spot perfectly cubical pigs in the movie. The City of Lost Children, 1995. The 1995 science fantasy flick was directed by Marc Caro and Jean-Pierre Jeunet. The film followed the bizarre story of a genetically engineered creature named Crank, who had lost his ability to dream. He believed that dreaming would make him immortal. Crank resorted to abducting children and stealing their dreams for himself, among other characters. The film also showed us the adventures of One, a carnival strongman whose younger brother was kidnapped by the evil genius. When One's employer died, the strongman was hired by a criminal gang of orphans led by conjoined twins, who were nicknamed the Octopus. One attempted to rescue his brother from Crank's oil rig, being aided by members of the gang who had trained venomous fleas in their arsenal. One was played by Rob Perlman, who went on to star in classic movies like Hellboy, Pacific Rim, and many more. The City of Lost Children is a spectacle of peculiarity, with storytelling way ahead of its time. The filmmakers used unsettling camera angles like the numerous scenes shot through fisheye lenses, paired with unusual perspectives and grotesque humor, to put together a movie that felt like a fever dream. Did you know that the post-apocalyptic, atom punk, and retro-futuristic layout of the City of Lost Children heavily inspired the city designs of Bethesda's Fallout game series? We can assume that a reboot would do well in the present cinematic climate, well enough for it to gain a niche cult, following as a psychological drama.
What is your primary function? What is your primary function?
Hardware, 1990. The 1990 sci-fi horror film was also the directorial debut of Richard Stanley. The story began when a nomadic scavenger dug up a mysterious model of a robot buried in radioactive wastelands. The decrepit robot was brought to Alvy's junkyard and caught the attention of a former soldier known as Hard Mo Baxter. He considered the robot's head as the perfect gift for his girlfriend, who enjoyed turning scraps of metal into beautiful sculptures. The film shone a light on the harsh reality of living on an irradiated wasteland that led its residents to debate whether government sterilization to curb overpopulation was an ethical choice. Alvy's research on the robot revealed that it was part of an army of robots created by their government, only to commit genocide. The robot was capable of assembling itself. What followed was Mo, his girlfriend Jill, and their peeping Tom neighbor fighting for their lives against the bloodthirsty robot. Hardware is considered by many to be a cult film that isn't meant for mainstream audiences. Although the film presented a depressing view of the future, the end gave us one of the most memorable fight-to-the-death scenes between Jill and the murderous robot.
I want to negotiate.
Yes, sir.
Johnny Mnemonic, 1995. Before The Matrix, Keanu Reeves starred in the 1995 cyberpunk action film, Johnny Mnemonic, directed by Robert Longo. The year is 2021, and as predicted, the world is run by the internet to the point that humans have developed a chronic condition known as nerve attenuation syndrome, which was a raging pandemic caused by overexposure to electromagnetic radiation from technology that had taken over everything. The world was also run by megacorporations, which added to hostile conditions that supplemented the disease. The protagonist, Johnny, is a mnemonic courier whose job is to transport confidential information stored in a device implanted in his brain for corporations. While working on a project for scientists in Beijing, Johnny's mnemonic device was overloaded with information. Johnny was unexpectedly confronted by the Yakuza, but aided by an AI female companion, and eventually rescued by the Low-Techs, who were an anarchical, anti-establishment rebel group. Johnny also realized that the greedy corporations intentionally withheld the cure for NAS, since they were profiting more off of mitigation treatments. Johnny ended up stealing the cure and also was restored with his childhood memories. This film was a semi-hit when it was released on streaming services in 2021. The same year it was set. Johnny Mnemonic is a film that spoke on themes that became relevant far sooner than anyone anticipated. Humans getting sick from chronic screen time, and corporations intentionally withholding healthcare. On the brighter side, the cyberpunk thriller managed to set a vague foundation for The Matrix. Lonm Man, 1992. The 1992 sci-fi horror flick directed by Brett Leonard portrayed the story of an intellectually disabled gardener. The film begins with Dr. Lawrence Angelo, played by Pierce Brosnan. Dr. Angelo worked for Virtual Space Industries and conducted research through the experimentation of psychoactive drugs and VR as a way to boost cognitive health. Though Lawrence was well-intentioned, his employers were being funded by a secretive organization that had intentions of creating biological weapons of war. Dr. Lawrence's test subject was a chimp named Roscoe, who began displaying signs of aggression and was eventually replaced by the gardener, Job Smith. The new lab rat was subjected to a treatment that had the aggressor factors removed, but he also manifested telepathy and telekinesis. The shady funders meddled in the experiment and swapped his therapy for the old aggression-inducing one. The once simple and docile Job was unnaturally tempted to go on a rampage and murder all the people who had wronged him. He even lobotomized his lover in Lawrence's lab. Job's plan was to reach the ultimate stage of evolution and enter the Virtual Space Industry's computer mainframe, which was connected to systems all over the world. Eventually, Job left his corporeal human shell behind and transformed into a digital entity. Dr. Lawrence Angelo followed his former test subject to put things right, only to be mercilessly crucified by Job in virtual reality. A melodramatic tale, the film The Lawnmower Man is said to be loosely based on Stephen King's 1975 short story of the same name. Since its release, the movie has prompted the making of its own graphic novel by Innovation Comics, a sequel, and 2 video games. Freejack, 1992. The 1992 sci-fi thriller directed by Jeff Murphy is a story of the rich going to baffling lengths to evade death. The year is 2009, and the ultra-rich often hire bonejackers who are capable of time travel. The bonejackers would travel back in time and snatch the bodies of those on the brink of death. In turn, these would be used as replacement bodies for the rich to remain immortal. Alex Furlong, played by Emilio Estevez, was a Formula One racer, moments away from a fatal car crash when he was snatched up by the bonejackers and brought to New York in the 21st century. It's a dystopian sight to see, with crime and the drug crisis running rampant. His captors were taken by surprise by a mercenary named Victor Van Syndak, played by Mick Jagger. The mercenary was hired by McCandless, the CEO of McCandless Corporation, who wanted to download his consciousness into Alex's body. Alex escaped Van Syndak and is now considered a freejack, those who were snatched but managed to escape their bonejackers. In this depressing future, freejacks are considered to be delinquents with no fundamental human rights. Freejack is a struggle for one's freedom and control over one's body. The sci-fi flick had a promising story, but was undelivered on the screens. Perhaps a reboot made in the 21st century would do it justice. Virtuosity, 1995. The 1995 sci-fi drama directed by Brett Leonard mapped out a story of revenge and virtual reality gone wrong. Former police officer Park Barnes, played by Denzel Washington Jr., was suspended for killing his family's killer. After his 17 years of sentence, he was seen testing out a new virtual reality kit with his buddy, Donovan. The pair were hunting down a being made by combining all of the most dangerous serial killers in the world. This VR entity was named Sid, played by Russell Crowe. Sid, short for sadistic, intelligent, and dangerous, shocked Donovan to the extent of an epileptic seizure, which killed him. Despite the danger he posed, Sid was transferred into an artificially engineered android body in the real world. The police department made a deal with Barnes. If he managed to capture Sid, the disgraced officer's suspension would be excused. Meanwhile, Sid began his bloody rampage. Starting with the LA Olympic Auditorium, the film brilliantly shows us Barnes' desperate pursuit of the evil android and eventually captures him, sending him back to virtual reality. Officer Park Barnes redeemed himself by solving Sid's case, and discovering it was another Sid program that killed his family. In the cinematic climate in which it was released, the film was considered to be filled with bright ideas and fresh thinking. It was well received, to the extent of being novelized by author Terry Bison. The Fifth Element, 1997. The premise of the 1997 sci-fi flick was conceptualized when Luc Besson was 16, and he went on to direct the movie when he was 38. The story began in 1914 with the alien species known as Mondoshaoans, who took a great weapon from their human contact in an ancient Egyptian temple. This strange weapon contained all four elements: water, fire, earth, and air, plus a fifth element encased in a stone sarcophagus. It is said that this special weapon was the only thing capable of destroying a devastating evil that appeared every 5,000 years. Fast forward to the year 2263. The evil was making its way to Earth in the form of a massive fireball. The present human contact of the Mondoshaoans warned the president of the Federated Territories of the impending danger. The Mondoshaoan ship carrying the great weapon was intercepted by a gang of extraterrestrial mercenaries hired by Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, played by Gary Oldman. A severed hand was procured from the wreckage, which was then cybernetically made into a humanoid weapon named Lilo, played by Mila Jovovich. Lilo is the mysterious fifth element who finds herself disheartened by humanity's cruelty, but still uses her light to defeat the evil. The most iconic scene from the film is when Lilo pulls out her multipass, which makes audiences fall in love with her character. The Fifth Element has a unique plot that fuses various time periods into one beautifully woven story of intergalactic conflict. Fire in the Sky, 1992. The 1993 sci-fi mystery directed by Robert Lieberman is the perfect X-File-esque story. The year was 1975, when a group of loggers was headed home after a grueling day of work in the White Mountains. One of them, Travis Walton, spotted a strange light over the tree line and decided to investigate, only to be struck in the heart by an extraterrestrial beam of light. The other loggers feared that Walton had been killed and instantly notified the local sheriff, who insisted on the gang to take lie detector tests. They even suspected that one of the loggers with a sketchy past was responsible for their friend's disappearance. These claims were shot down when Walton turned up at a nearby gas station, alive, but having seen horrible things that would haunt him for a very long time. He was gripped with flashbacks that took him back to the time when he was encased in a slimy alien cocoon. He bumped into another cocoon that had rotting human remains. Aboard a strange alien ship of bizarre humanoid aliens, Walton was subjected to inhumane, invasive torture and bodily experiments, which left him scarred inside out. Back on Earth, his abduction story was written off as a hoax, and the logger would have to live with the horrific trauma till his dying days. Unlike most tech-heavy sci-fi films, Fire in the Sky resonated with audiences in the way that it was a deeply emotional film that explored intimate dynamics between a group of friends and the small town they lived in. Contact, 1997. The 1997 sci-fi drama directed by Robert Zemeckis explored the question we all have often thought of: is there life in the galaxy beyond us? Zemeckis' Contact has been referred to as the forerunner of Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Dr. Ellie Arroway, played by Jodie Foster, worked for the SETI program, aka the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Her daily work consisted of listening to strange radio signals from space and checking for signs of sentient extraterrestrial life. She eventually stumbled upon a peculiar signal made up of prime numbers emitting from the star Vega. There was a video hidden in there, too. It was the opening speech made by Hitler for the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. This chilling evidence was also complemented by over 63,000 pages of uncoded data, which, upon decrypting, turned out to be instructions on how to build an advanced transportation machine. Dr. Arroway was initially selected to be the candidate who would travel in the machine, but her atheism was brought to light by Christian philosopher Palmer Joss, played by Matthew McConaughey. Dr. Arroway did get to rightfully commandeer a second pod built secretly in Japan, armed with numerous recording devices. Dr. Arroway's findings were enlightening. Through wormholes, she witnessed a planet with advanced alien civilizations and even met an ET entity that had taken the form of her dead father. A running theme in the film is the debate of science versus religion and the existence of God versus the existence of extraterrestrial life. Back to the Future, 1990, the third and final installment in the iconic Back to the Future trilogy by Robert Zemeckis, has an equally thrilling story as its predecessors. In the year 1955, Marty McFly had seen Emmett Doc Brown traverse 70 years into his part in his DeLorean time machine. Marty hurried back in time to the year 1885 to rescue Doc. There, he encountered his Irish ancestors, and a Doc madly in love with his schoolteacher, Clara. After a brief tussle with Biff Tannen's great-grandfather, Marty and Doc attempt to fix their powerless DeLorean. The film showed us Marty successfully going back to 1985, moments before the time machine was destroyed by an oncoming freight train. Emmett Doc Brown, on the other hand, flies into an unspecified time period with Clara and their children. In the end, he had a blank slate for the future, free to be filled with beautiful memories. The last movie of the trilogy gave audiences a satisfying end to the franchise. A reboot would mean reviving the settled plot or even the beginning of a TV show. Gremlins 2, The New Batch, 1990. The New Batch is the 90s sequel to the 1984 classic, Gremlins. Both films were directed by Joe Dante. However, for the second film, Dante consciously chose to make it anarchistic, which means that the 1990 film is more lighthearted and comical than the first. It still followed the adventures of Gizmo, now a lab rat for scientists in the Clamp Center lab of New York. His previous owner, Billy Peltzer, did come to his rescue, but when left unattended, he accidentally got wet and spawned 5 more Mogwai from his back. These newly birthed creatures trapped Gizmo in the air vents and raided the food court at night, turning into gremlins. The chaos that followed was the gremlins genetically mutating themselves into balls of electrical energy, becoming gremlin spider hybrids, among other things. Gremlins 2 was considered to be a satire sequel, almost like a parody of the first movie. While there were talks of Gremlins 3 being released in 2023, the film is stuck in the developmental process, and we can expect it by 2025. Mars Attack, 1996. Mars Attack is a morbid sci-fi comedy directed by Tim Burton with a highly star-studded cast. This hilarious story portrayed remarkable performances of big names like Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Pierce Brosnan, Sarah Jessica Parker, Natalie Portman, Danny DeVito, and Jack Black, to name a few. Fun fact, the film's source material was actually a set of trading cards popular in the 60s. The plot followed the story of large numbers of Martians visiting Earth. While they claimed to come in peace, things got violent pretty quickly. The humans still assumed this tussle happened because of extraterritorial cultural misunderstandings, only after the Martians proceeded to wipe out most of the US Congress. The story takes a thrilling turn when the President of the United States is nearly assassinated by a Martian disguised as a blonde woman, and his scientific advisor is abducted by a Martian ship. Everywhere we saw, the beings from Mars had begun to infiltrate human society. Mars Attack is a cult classic film with all of Tim Burton's signature touches. It's an ode to the sci-fi flicks of the 50s and 70s, and also a spoof of disaster movies. It's a cautionary tale that tells us how futile it would be to trust life forms from an entirely different planet. While the humans uncharacteristically tried to befriend the Martians, the result was being incinerated by their ray guns. Marvelous verdict. Here we come to the end of the list of the top 17 sci-fi movies of the 90s that deserve a reboot. While the majority are of the belief that the originals should be left untouched, the stories shouldn't be set in stone. Everything evolves over time, even our favorite characters from these timeless classics. Given all of these films are science fiction, it would be interesting to see them rebooted with the advanced CGI that exists today. We also know that Hollywood loves nothing more than to feed into its audience's nostalgia, hence making these remakes and reboots a genuine possibility. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.